repeat of what we saw during Friday's qualifying when only one car came out in the first 10 minutes. But conditions here this afternoon are different to those of Friday. It's much warmer, there are no clouds whatsoever in the sky, and there's a mixed opinion amongst teams, drivers, as to whether the circuit, in fact, is quicker, the same, or even slower. In fact, in the morning session, the 1.5 hour unofficial session, 13 drivers improved on their Friday qualifying time, 11 were slower. Nothing particularly conclusive. Majority of the times that were improvements came from the people in places 10 through to 20. More of the front runners, Alain, Prost, Ayrton, Senna, they failed to improve. Damon Hill made up a lot of time indeed, and in fact ended up being second quickest in that 1.5 hour session.
One of the 13 drivers who did improve, of course, was Derek Warwick. The Englishman back in his footwork with a Mugen Honda engine. Christian Fittipaldi, still a spectator. He did have a seat fitting yesterday, but Derek felt he was fit enough to have a crack at what could well be his last Formula One race. Damon Hill leaves the pits. He did a 1:14.078 this morning. He was second fastest, because fastest was Alain Prost on a 1:13.854. Third fastest this morning was Ayrton Senna, followed by Michael Schumacher and Riccardo Patrese, both using four-wheel steering on their Benettons. But Damon, tied in a fight for second place in the Drivers' World Championship, needs to get that car in the front row, John?
Well, it's got to be a necessity to be on the front row in Adelaide. In fact, Damon's time this morning would have put him onto the third place on the grid, the second row of the grid. Not enough. You've got to get onto the front row of the grid. Once this Grand Prix starts, everybody has to file through that very, very narrow and very slow chicane, and the front row cars naturally get a tremendous advantage. People behind tend to trip over one another, and in the early laps it's so easy if you're on the front of the grid to open up a lead which you then can control.
So Damon Hill nearly finishing his out lap. He's got a lot of work to do. His time this morning, a 1:14.0. And he's got to beat a 1:13.8 to get in front of teammate Alain Prost. Currently sixth fastest, the man who will start his 18th Formula One race. He's won 3 out of 18. He's got 2 pole positions and 3 fastest laps. And he's attacking the circuit. He's driving with a lot more confidence than he was yesterday.
I think just simply miles around this very tortuous 2.3 mile circuit in Adelaide, and it brings confidence. Although Damon himself, on occasion this morning, I tell you, had the car literally full lock, hit the car sideways on a number of these very slow, very bumpy corners indeed. He knows what he has to do, and the complaint that both Damon Hill and Alain Prost have had throughout the weekend is they're not getting the best out of their car. They both felt from this morning they had made improvements, but they're not seeing, if you like, that comfort zone we've heard about all through the year. It has just evaporated here in Adelaide.
Another man who was more happy than yesterday afternoon, by the way, was Eddie Irvine, who had an ECU fail in qualifying yesterday. The engine refused to run cleanly, but this morning all was back to normal, and he was 15th fastest, a couple of tenths away from teammate Rubens Barrichello. Well, Damon Hill has improved a tenth of a second over yesterday's time, so that's on his second flying lap, and his first flying lap. So for people that had a problem, John, I think we're not going to see the same situation as last year, where the track was about a second to a second and a half slower on that second day of qualifying. I actually think times could well improve.
Well, I think obviously Damon Hill can improve, and there are flags out, big shunt. That's up on Hutt Street, just coming onto Hutt Street. We saw those waved yellow flags, and that will have affected Damon's run. He would have had to slow down, even if it was only momentarily. He would have had to come off the throttle. Oh, dear me, yes, and he was in trouble even before he got into big trouble on his way out of East Terrace, I suspect. And well, Damon Hill's still pounding away, and he will hope by the time he returns the completion of this lap that part of the track is clear.
Well, so Pedro Lamy unlikely to improve on his personal best and will remain somewhere. Oh, he has improved on that first flying lap, but well, 21st position at the moment.
And that time on the screen reflects what Damon Hill had to do when he came round and found Pedro Lami's car spread across the racetrack. So try and try again. But remembering from Friday qualifying, it took 5 or 6 laps before these Goodyear tyres seemed to give it their best. Now, track conditions, as we have said, are quite different today. It may be that optimum point in tyre performance is going to come forward by a lap or possibly 2 laps. And watching Damon will give us a pretty good gauge as to what we can expect from Alain Prost, Ayrton Senna, Michael Schumacher, the 2 Ferraris, Mika Häkkinen. I think it's going to be a cracking session. I think we're going to see progress developing fairly slowly in the initial stage of this 1-hour session. But in the last 20, 15 minutes or so, it's going to be, well, open city out there.
We go through the very narrow streets of Adelaide. We're now actually at the back of the paddock on this beautifully laid out circuit, and I think it's amazing, John, that everything we see here, whether it's grandstands, whether it's garages, anything, is all temporary.
The organisers in Adelaide really do put on a fantastic venue for this Grand Prix, and I think it's the Grand Prix in the year where most drivers and teams, certainly after an exhausting season, are actually very happy indeed to end the Grand Prix season.
So while we are watching Mika Häkkinen going around very slowly, and Mika gone out and gone straight back into the pits. Actually, he's done 1 lap, so there could well be a problem on his McLaren Ford. So Mika currently in 4th position. Barrichello has not improved yet on his lap time from yesterday, although he's going round. And there we see the current situation. The top 8 with Senna, Prost, Schumacher, Häkkinen, Berger, Hill, Alesi and Brundle. In board with Jean Alesi. Actually, there's a car being hoisted away.
Ooh, and I think Jean Alesi was somewhat distracted by that. He went wide in the corner, he got into trouble, he recovered from it. Again, it's going to affect this lap, and Adelaide, time and time again, produces those kind of little errors that you saw from Jean Alesi. Maybe the distraction of the car being lifted off the circuit, maybe just simply a little bit too quickly into the corner, but a little bit here is far too much.
John, what we've seen people do a lot of times over the weekend is try and go too hard and maybe even too deep into a corner, and either going straight on because they just simply brake too late or lose it on the braking.
I think the most difficult thing on a circuit like Adelaide, and in Adelaide in particular, is you've got to retain control. You cannot allow your normal sense of going quicker to lead you into, for example, rushing up into these corners, braking really heavily and really late, because what it does is spoil the apex, but even worse, spoils the exit. And if you could control your emotions to such a degree that you did not brake later in these qualifying runs, but use the benefit of fresh tyres and pick up the throttle a bit earlier and benefit from increase in traction and increased position in the corner, that's how you're going to pick up time.
Well, Jean Alesi is currently half a minute into his lap. Johnny Herbert's improved to 18th and demoted Eddie Irvine back to 19th. And Alesi going on to Brabham Straight.
British driver.
His good friend Alain Prost has just left the pit.
Well, Prost, the first of the 2 front row men onto the circuit. We're about 18 minutes into this second qualifying session in Adelaide, and there we see Alain Prost. So this is really a very, very important session for the Frenchman, the new world champion, and he knows that whatever he does, he will get an immediate response from Ayrton Senna.
Also, John, interesting comments from Alain Prost here in Adelaide. He confirmed that he had been approached by McLaren to drive for them next year. He also denied the opportunity, and he said, well, if I do go to McLaren, and I've been with Renault he literally said, being with Renault, then thinking to go with Peugeot, even though I am French, I think it would not be very well appreciated, according to Mr. Prost.
And very nice words they are too, Alain. Well, Alain Prost coming up to complete his first out lap, and I hope within the space of a minute and a quarter, whether this circuit, in fact, is quicker or slower. Alain Prost looking for his final pole position of a Grand Prix career, which has been absolutely outstanding.
If he does get pole position, or Damon Hill for that matter, then it's the first time in Grand Prix history that a team will have had 16 pole positions in 16 Grand Prix. If they don't get pole position here, they'll share the record with McLaren for 15 pole positions in the season. McLaren has done it twice and Williams done it twice.
Well, I mean, that would be a lovely thing for the Williams team, but for Alain Prost, it's the value of having that pole position. He knows the danger at the start here in Adelaide, the rush down into that very, very unforgiving and narrow first chicane, and if you've got to come from behind and try and match the pole man in, it is a trouble area. So Prost, desperate for reasons of comfort apart from anything else, to secure his final pole, his opportunity of final pole.
One more corner to go, and then we'll see what the first time of this afternoon is for Alain Prost. The gearbox changing up, and the time coming up on our screen, a 19.226 on his first flying lap. And we can't see any traffic ahead of him, so maybe Alain is in for a couple of good clear laps.
Well, that opening lap, of course, is an absolutely meaningless lap, but what it has done is given Prost the opportunity at that particular speed to get a feel for each corner and to know how much grip each corner is going to provide, and he will therefore make his own adjustments accordingly.
Prost, who has got to improve half a second to provisionally steal pole position away from Ayrton Senna. There we see that, the 1:13.807 he's done yesterday, and the 1:13.371, a new qualifying record, incidentally, by Ayrton Senna. Beyond, if we look at the top of the leaderboard with the top 8 here, we see 2 McLarens, 2 Williams, but also 2 Ferraris, a Ligier, and it's a bit of the old story we've seen all year, although Ferrari's been closing the gap the last couple of Grand Prix.
Indeed they have, and in fact I think this is very good for 1994. I've said it already, I think we're going to have a really vintage Grand Prix season next year, and with the advent of new cars, Haas cars, let's call them, they were the cars that were always used so much in Grand Prix racing. I think we're going to see a very exciting season, and whether you've got a Renault engine, a Peugeot engine, a Ferrari engine, or the brand new, and just been confirmed here this morning, Ford engine that will be exclusive to the Benetton team for 1994. V8 engine, of course. It's going to be very, very exciting.
And on top of all those manufacturers, we've got Mercedes-Benz coming in to power the Sauber team, and of course Honda's involvement with Mugen. Well, Prost, it doesn't seem to be quicker than yesterday, and if it isn't, John, I think Damon Hill's time is a very good one.
Well, we have to see what Prost is going to do, but midway around the circuit he was over one of the curbs. You saw the effect it had on the in-car camera. In fact, 14.595, and that is it's just 0.7 of a second slower than he achieved. Damon Hill's time, of course, 14.333, 0.2 of a second quicker.
Williams, that run the car this morning with that double rear wing, took it off again for qualifying, and we assume it'll stay off for the race then.
Well, it's really down, I think, just personal preference with drivers. Every piece of work that is carried out on a car is data logged, and the team then overlap each lap. They look at each segment, each corner, and they decide which way it is best to go. They've chosen to take it off, where other people, Ferrari, for example, are running with it.
0.8 of a second slower. This point. Oh, I don't know how much, how big a risk I take if I say the circuit's slower than yesterday. Let's see what Gerhard. Oh, Gerhard nearly missed that corner. Gerhard, and that's what we've seen this morning. We've seen it yesterday. People trying to go in hard and just overshooting the corner.
Well, they're just, in effect, overdriving, and this is the discipline that you've got to instill in yourself. It's very, very hard to do because every driver here is obviously trying to improve, but to retain a sense of discipline and at the same time push hard, it is difficult. And it's beguiling the circuit. It looks a lot easier than it is. Fairly straightforward corners, but just 3 or 4 miles an hour into a corner extra, car runs wide, and then you're in trouble.
Grand Prix victories total for Gerhard Berger is 8, and of course the last Grand Prix he won was exactly a year ago when he took victory in his final Grand Prix for the McLaren team here in Adelaide.
Well, as Gerhard has said, it's been a very long and hard season for him, and he would obviously love to win yet again in Adelaide, having one victory in a season for Ferrari. And Ferrari themselves have been short of victories all the way back to 1991, when Alain Prost was the man at that point who scored those wins.
In Spain, the last one. Well, Berger currently...
He's got a problem with that corner, Alain. It's the second time in succession that he's got it wrong, and maybe Gerhard should just... Again, you can see the car very, very nervous indeed. I think what's happening is he knows he can't turn the wheel quickly. He knows he can't sort of tug on the wheel, make the car just change direction very quickly because the back end is going to step out. So he gets caught with having to sort of tippy-toe around the corner. Oh, was not lucky to get away with it this time. And that's the feeling that I think he's going through at the minute.
It's what people try to do as well, to sort of be able to lean on the back. And it's something that just, I think with most of the cars, hasn't been possible.
I think that the problem again, Paul, that is the particular nature of these cars. These are flat-bottomed cars. They're not the traditional ground effect, but they do produce massive downforce. But they're hypersensitive to pitch, and any change in the pitch in the car alters the downforce front to back so dramatically. So then you have to compromise your car setup by running very stiff springs, sometimes very stiff roll bars as well. That in turn creates other problems in low-speed corners. It's a real conundrum in effect.
Well, there's a man we've haven't seen a lot this weekend, a man who's had a lot of problems, Toshio Suzuki, in his second Grand Prix with the LaRousse Lamborghini, and well, he's still in a lot of... I mean, you got to feel sorry for the man, John. He's done about 13 laps altogether in 2 days so far.
I think those are very, very expensive laps because I have to say Toshio Suzuki is not on a free ride. This is being paid for. So mileage per yen, pretty poor at the minute.
Oh, and nearly going off.
And I just wonder maybe the oil smoke that we're seeing coming from the back of the car, is that something that may have leaked onto the rear of the car? Maybe he just caught the side of a tyre. Certainly caught his attention.
Toshio Suzuki, a very seasoned Formula 3000 campaigner in Japan, where he races against Eddie Irvine. And Irvine, I think, said... Eddie actually said yesterday he thought that Jordan would be able to do a mid-115. Well, if he does that, then he'll put him on 8th place on the grid for the moment. And he said, well, that should be possible. Hasn't done it yet today, though.
I think that Eddie's reference to doing a high 15 really was in Friday's conditions. And there you see now, well, Suzuki made it back to the pits, but, well, an eruption from one of the banks of that Chrysler V12 engine, and that will not be doing much more running this afternoon. And really disappointment, further disappointment for Toshio Suzuki.
Schumacher on his first flying lap. He's got a lot of wing on. You see, he's got about 3 planes. Oh, and there, big slide from Schumacher, obviously. Oh, and again, the circuit's being very slippery there, maybe.
And he also lets our hopes that Riccardo Patrese saw him coming. He did. And I suspect Michael Schumacher, watching his driving, he will have a lot of rear wing in the car, obviously, but he had probably a little bit more on the front to nail the front of the car on that critical turn-in. But when I say critical, I mean it, because when you run so much front-end downforce, you must be very, very careful. If you turn the front of the car too quickly, the back loses grip, and that's what we saw. And again, turning into the hairpin bend, the back of the car just squirming under power.
John, we shouldn't forget, I think, this car's running a 4-wheel steering system.
I don't really know whether 4-wheel steering systems are any advantage. I suppose the theory of it is, yes, it does. It helps the entry to the corner when all 4 wheels are working for you, rather than the 2 rear wheels, which are also the driving wheels, wanting to push you straight on. I think it's one of those things that on the drawing board you can say, yes, this will work under circumstances, but when you've got conditions like this, I think they outweigh the circumstances.
Currently, Michael Schumacher is 2 seconds slower than he was yesterday. His first flying lap, 1:16.037.
Again, look, you see, using the power to help the car steer out of the corner. Now, the tyres are on their second flying lap. They are more settled. There's more consistency now in this lap from Schumacher. But the same thing applies to heat. It also affects engine performance. Over the curb and the exit onto this long Brabham straight. Second intermediate time due very shortly, 1.2 seconds away from Senna's time from Friday afternoon. And I think it's pretty clear that, in fact, the front row, the second row, third row are probably going to remain as we saw them some 24 hours ago.
The only one, maybe, John, putting in a little surprise there is Damon Hill, because he is only a couple of tenths of a second away from 4th place on the grid. And maybe Damon would be able to do something very special today. After all, he's the only one in the top 10 so far that has improved on his time.
Well, Damon will have to be very selective, in my view, as to when he wants to go onto the circuit. He has 1 set of tyres left. The tyres have got about a life of 5 to 6 laps. That will, of course, bring him up to his maximum of 12 laps, which is the maximum permitted in qualifying. And it's just chance. You could go out, measure it almost to perfection, and then suddenly somebody just pulls out of the pit lane, runs down into the chicane just after the start-finish line, and it's all for nothing.
Well, we are riding with Ayrton Senna on his second flying lap. His first one was a 1:18.333. So that is some 5 seconds slower than his personal best. But again, the first lap, always get a feel of the circuit, see what it's like, and then the second and third, you nail it, John?
Very much so. I think that Senna will be looking very cautiously and very clearly all around the circuit, trying to understand what. No, there's a yellow flag, a stationary yellow flag out. There's a wave yellow flag. Somebody has stopped. It's one of the 2 Benettons.
Looks like Riccardo Patrese stopped there.
Indeed. So again, Senna now has backed out of it. There we see what happened, and that's a place we've seen incidents throughout the weekend. And the right front takes a bashing now, the right rear as well. And there's now not just a damaged Benetton, but a lot of dirt, gravel, right on the line as you exit the chicane. Here we see what happened. Almost a mirror of what Gerhard Berger suggested. Now a mirror of Jean Alesi. Riccardo trying carefully to reverse the car at something like 70 miles an hour, and bosh. There you are. Well, the end of the day for Riccardo Patrese. Currently in 9th place. He didn't have a chance to even... Well, that was his first flying lap, in effect. He'd done a 1:21 on his opening lap. Serious attempt, and that again is an illustration of just how sensitive this circuit is to anything more than a sensitive driver.
Derek Warwick's moved up to 18th position. He has done a 1:17.193 and is just in front of Johnny Herbert and Eddie Irvine. I know Eddie Irvine will be pretty unhappy with that situation. Let's see whether the yellow flag is still there. The yellow flag's still there, but the car should be out of the way. Would you want to be track marshal standing there?
I think that those flags are there to be obeyed. Senna took a calculated risk that there was not going to be anybody certainly on the track, but also that the track itself was going to be relatively clear of any debris or any dust, rubble, bits of cars, whatever. 0.8 of a second at that first intermediate point off his pole time from Friday afternoon, and that's a reasonable indication. I know he would have lost, I suspect, maybe 2/10 with Patrice's car. There we see it. It's in a fairly critical place. It catches the driver's eye as he goes through the chicane, and you're never really sure just how clear the track is beyond that until you've completed a lap. That's another lap out of your 12 gone. The count just drops.
Well, I was just going to say, he probably lost a little on that Patrici incident, but nowhere near 0.8 of a whole second. And the gap has grown now during the course of this lap, and I think Ayrton will probably do a high 15. Thanks very much, Ayrton.
But Allard, watch this lap, because now Senna knows what's all around the circuit. This is going to be maximum attack from Senna. He has been his third complete flying lap. He's on his fourth one now. The tyres ought to be just about as good as they're going to be. He has got a feel for the circuit. He will now, in his own way, ensure that what he is going to get out of the car is the maximum that is potential on a day like today.
Well, Ayrton, oh, and what's happened here? Mr. Comas. Oh, yeah, well, we've seen Mr. Comas do this quite often this weekend, I must say. Lose it on turn-in.
Well, we've seen again a lot of that, and some of them have been prettier than others. That one I would have given about 4 out of 10 for. I think it wasn't the best effort from Eric Comas, certainly this weekend, and not a match for some of the others from other drivers.
Ayrton's backed off. So he probably came across Eric Comas' stationary car. Oh, there's some traction control leaving the pits for you. Ayrton going back in. I think he's decided that it's probably not going to be any quicker today.
That's certainly one of his thoughts, I would imagine, but also he may feel that the adjustments that the car may have had before the session began, or whatever he left his car from the morning session, is now no good.
Andrea Cesaris has a big improvement over yesterday's time. Well, half a second, which I think we today can safely say is a fairly big improvement. In 15th place, and while we are running with Martin Brundle, I think there's a fairly big chance, John, it's Andrea's last Grand Prix. Because Okio Katayama has been confirmed by the team for next year, but what about for Andrea?
Well, I think there are a number of drivers who are in contact with Uncle Ken, and some of them may be able to assist the team in some funding. On the other hand, the team do know Andrea very well, and overall he's done a reasonably good job for the team. Though here in Adelaide, I must say, they probably wonder whether that's their emotion, because he's been in the wall twice. But he comes back and he puts that little innocent look on his face and smiles and says, "I'm terribly sorry, but you know, I was trying 110%, and the guy's trying 110%. If he does shunt the car, a team prefers that than know of the guy's only giving 90% and brings the car back in one piece."
Martin Brundle, fastest passive car in Adelaide. 1:16.710, and that is 0.7 of a second away from yesterday, and exactly the same gap there is between Alain Prost's time of yesterday and Prost's time of today.
And again waved yellow flags just where Martin Brundle, let me see,
Oh.
Aguri Suzuki, he left the pit going like gangbusters. He left the traction control, first gear, almost second gear, brand new tyres. He got 4 corners. Oh dear, he spun it. Has he kept the engine running, or is Aguri Suzuki going to have to go back to the pit with a very bright red face?
Brundle, the special livery Ligier Renault. Actually, I think I prefer the car in this car, John. Well, Gerhard Berger then.
Certainly one of the most exciting men this season. Controversial at times as well. Sometimes his driving tactics have brought scorn from other drivers. He also manages to be around when there's an incident happening, sometimes totally innocently, sometimes in the course of a race. Already been off here fairly heavily on Friday in that 90-minute session. Berger alongside Damon Hill on the third row of the grid. I'm sure Damon would really like to be ahead of Gerhardt. Oh, and there we see Aguri Suzuki.
Well, that's what happened to Aguri. A little bit too much faith in traction control there.
Well, like so many people, he came down to the corner, just tugged on the wheel, used the throttle pedal a little bit too heavily, and there you saw it.
Gerhardt getting on to Brabham Straight. And the Ferrari is currently in 5th and 7th position. And the top 8, basically as it was at the beginning of the session. Damon Hill on his second run behind the caption. There we see all 24 drivers being listed, while Damon Hill is on the attack.
Well, Damon is obviously clearly using more circuit than Alain Prost, and he is doing what most drivers in qualifying do. They really push very hard, and there you see under half a second, 0.397 of a second off, and that's the second intermediate point on this lap from the time of Ayrton Senna, and this ought to see Damon Hill at least onto the second row of the grid.
Damon Hill, the hairpin to go, turn it in, get the power down, and it is another lap for Damon. It's going to be an improvement of 1:13.826. Onto the second row of the grid goes Damon Hill, and only 0.02 of a second behind teammate Alain Prost. So Damon is clearly on the attack.
I think also Williams have managed to adjust Damon Hill's car, and I'm sure Alain Prost will be getting similar attention to suit the conditions here. And this has really been, I think, the key to this afternoon's qualification. I think that's also why we saw Senna not really look terribly serious on his first qualifying run. He recognized that something different was required. Damon Hill has not brought that out of himself. It is because a combination of car change and Damon being able now to turn the wheel and open the throttle that has resulted in a significant improvement on what Damon achieved. 0.9 of a second quicker than he did on Friday afternoon.
So Damon Hill onto the second row of the grid. Now, can he put it on the front row of the grid? I think maybe that pole position might be just a little bit too far away. But John, isn't it funny? We're saying the conditions are slower, and suddenly Damon comes, bang. Here he goes with a brilliant time.
Well,
there, Damon, a little bit slower than his fastest lap so far, but still, John, the only driver in the 1:13.
yes, and Damon,
that's it. He's blown it
careful.
now.
Well, it's all over now for Damon, but he's done enough. He certainly is significant improvement, and I'm sure he'll be very angry and frustrated with himself for that little error, but he also will be delighted with the improvement that Williams and he himself have made with the car.
Oh, Damon stole it. Damon Hill has stole the engine. He's got to be pushed back, but it's the end of his session, and he was on his last flying lap anyway, but still, Damon Hill finished the session. Well, there's a big improvement, and I think the team and Damon, of course, will be very happy indeed. So, the situation here is that Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost are going to share the front row with about 10 minutes, just over 10 minutes to go in this final qualifier session from Adelaide. Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher are on the second row of the grid. Mika Häkkinen and Gerhard Berger on the third. Then it's Jean Alesi and Martin Brundle, followed by Riccardo Patrese and Uguri Suzuki. 6 drivers, 7 drivers so far have improved on their yesterday's time, and that is 7 out of 24. Or maybe, John, we should say 6 out of 24, because of course Derek Warwick was a certainty to improve on whatever he did yesterday.
Well, I think Derek Warwick probably watched us from his hotel bedroom because he was choked with flu. So here, another man shortly on the circuit, Alain Prost, on a second set of tyres. Prost hoping that the changes that the Williams team made to Damon Hill, and found almost a second for Damon Hill. Well, I don't think we can expect to see Alain Prost find nearly a second, but certainly he's looking for half a second or more on his time.
Oh, this is interesting. Michael Schumacher... No, I thought he stole the engine, sorry.
Well, it's a strange sound did come from that Schumacher car, and Eddie Irvine now following him onto the circuit on his second set of tyres. But the whole concept of what's going on today is a team's experience and understanding of what the change in track conditions are like. A driver will have been out this morning when, while it was warm, it is not as hot as it is now. And it is often the case, and there we see Marc Gounon, bang, left rear, that's the end of his session. The team have almost got to anticipate what a driver's going to come in and complain about. Well, he managed to spin it now. I think he's actually stalled it. And it's almost like a comedy of errors on the racetrack.
A lot of people spin, and that was actually a little replay of Pierluigi Martini spinning his Minardi. Well, Alain Prost, I think this, we're witnessing his very last qualifying lap ever of an illustrious career.
Well, I think he's going to go straight back into the pits. I don't
Thanks,
know what
Alain.
Alain Prost has decided to do. Either there's a problem that he doesn't feel comfortable with, or he wants a bit more of the same.
So, Prost straight back into the pits. Currently, as we see, in second place. And Damon Hill, I must say, got very close indeed to snatching that front row position away from his teammate. But John, it's debatable who's in the better position. Is it Prost or is it Hill? Because being a street circuit, there might be one side of the track definitely clearer to start than the other side.
Well, I think for sure when you look down on the grid, it, in my opinion, is better to be on the left-hand side of the circuit. That's the natural and shortest route to the first part of the chicane. Anybody on the right-hand side of the circuit is going to be in the dust. So if you follow that philosophy, then Damon, by being directly behind Senna, has got to have a certain advantage. But of course, it's literally a question of getting in there ahead of Alain Prost. If Prost can get a good start, he can close that gap on Damon Hill and prevent Hill from sliding under him onto the chicane.
Excitement, Mika Häkkinen, always good for maximum attack, as the Finnish people call it. Currently fifth.
Also for the Finns, of course, Juha Kankinen, the new rally world champion. And I'm not sure that Mika Häkkinen and JJ Leto will get some pleasure from that. They may wonder, well, can we see ourselves being on the podium here on Sunday afternoon? Certainly Mika Häkkinen. Probably, however, is a dream that he actually could stand on the winner's podium.
Half a second away, and that's a good effort.
And it certainly puts Damon's or Schumacher's second row position into jeopardy.
So, Mika Häkkinen on a charge here in Adelaide. Let's see what he can do. One more corner to go. He is not going to beat Damon Hill time, but he's going to be very close. A 1:45.96. Lost a lot of time on that last part of the circuit.
He certainly lost time as he exited onto start finish straight. He ran over the curb, and that in itself would have been maybe, well, 2/10 again, not enough to make significant changes. Great shame, because up until that second intermediate point, Mika was within half a second of team leader Ayrton Senna, who in fact is also on the circuit on his second set of tyres. There we see him.
So if we look at it, it's got a 13.3 for Senna, then a 13.8. for both Prost and Hill. A 14-0 for Schumacher, a 14-1 for Hakkinen, 14-1 for Berger, and then it's Jean Alesi with a 15-3. But the top six, again, being very close indeed.
Well, certainly that harbors well for a close or exciting Grand Prix in some 24 hours from now. But this is the man who really can, if you like, add more salt to the wound of Alain Prost. And Senna really capable of working miracles in these sort of conditions. The guy yesterday was absolutely magnificent. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see that lap. We were on Alain Prost at the time that Senna established that provisional pole, and it's remained so for about 5 minutes before the end of this final session of the 1993 season. And now traffic, Tyrrell, and it's not going to be cooperative. Well, it is now, but Senna will not be too happy about that. Okiya Katayama, slightly unfortunate being fixed in between. He couldn't really pull out of the way as quickly as Senna would have liked. He did his best once he got round the corner. Again, momentum gone, and Senna basically, I think, just going through the motions of a lap, and will seek out yet another clear lap.
Senna down Brabham Straight. So we see 1.3, nearly 1.4 seconds behind his own personal best. And while Michael Schumacher is improving his time, he's not improving his time over yesterday. And Ayrton Senna right in the curves. More improvements from Eddie Irvine, although not in position, only in time. A 1:17.341, still 19th. And another improvement from Derek Warwick, who's now done a 16.919 and is in 17th position. I think we can say well done, Derek. I mean, that's a good effort for a man who's only had one day at the circuit.
Well, Derek Warwick has never been short of guts in his motoring and motor racing career. And if he had to drag the bed, the nurse, the doctor with him, he would have had them in the pit lane, but he would have been in the car, as he is, in fact. And from experience, I know, and Derek likewise, the best thing you can do when you've got a flu is get rid of all those drugs that you've been given, get into the car, have a really good, solid 1 hour of sweat. I bet you a pound to a penny, Derek Warwick feels a lot better when this session is finished.
Senna was 0.6 of a second slower than his personal best of yesterday, good enough for pole position, and now 0.8 of a second slower. And Senna, who is going to score his 62nd pole position out of his career, and done that then in 158 Grand Prix. I mean, we all know it's an amazing record for winning 40 out of 157, but pole positions is as good a performance?
Well, this year they've been very scarce indeed. It's been a Williams whitewash. And Senna, in his last Grand Prix, a great association with the Marlboro McLaren team. Well, Jean Alesi, what are you going to do for us here? Let's see. Oh, and just on the exit of the corner, but barely did his right foot lift. He just enabled the car to continue that pirouette. He went sideways. He decided, well, I'm going to do one of those Mansell-esque donuts, and he'd probably come back to the pits and say, no, I didn't spin, no problem at all.
Well, Senna, we don't see the clock running at the moment, so we don't really know how close he is. The only thing we do know, this is Ayrton's very last flying lap. This man, Alain Prost, has got about 6 more to go. So Senna is going to go and watch the Tag Heuer Olivetti screen, while Alain Prost is going to try and improve by half a second to score Williams' 16th pole position of the year.
Well, Alain Prost is a great fan of Adelaide. He won his second championship here in 1986, and he got out of the car and jumped for joy, and I'm quite certain that that was the case in qualifying this afternoon. He'll be equally joyous after 13 in fact years of a Grand Prix racing career. He wants to finish it ideally with pole position, fastest race lap, and of course victory itself.
Well, Ayrton Senna has not improved on his personal best. He is still on pole position, but Ayrton Senna's best of the day is a 1:14.779, and the only driver in the 1:13 is Damon Hill, doing that 1:13.827, currently good enough for third place on the grid, just behind teammate Alain Prost. And John, this man, we're riding with him at the moment. Prost is the only driver who could possibly wrench pole position away from Senna.
Well, he's not going to do it on this lap because in that 25-second segment he was already 1 second slower than Senna's time from Friday afternoon. And I think Alain Prost recognises that he is not going to have the pole position here for this final Grand Prix, and his final Grand Prix of his career. He had to concede it to Ayrton Senna, and well, all eyes will now focus on the red light on Sunday afternoon. Who will be first into the chicane as we see the checkered flag out to end this final session, qualifying session of 1993.
So, Alain Prost has left it too late. We can say that because the checkered flag is out, and the grid for tomorrow's Grand Prix will be Senna, Prost, Hill, Schumacher, Hakkinen, Berger, Alesi, Brundle, the Tracy Suzuki. That's your top 10 for the Australian Grand Prix 93. Well, John, what are you going to expect?
A lot of things to be proved, I believe. I think Prost will want to win the Grand Prix very badly. Likewise, Ayrton Senna will also want to win it very badly. Prost retiring, Senna moving into this car. I wonder which number Ayrton Senna will carry on the car in 1994.
So, with Damon Hill, the only driver who's improved on his time in the top 13, could he be the dark horse for tomorrow's Grand Prix?
Well, it's going to be a very, I would say, difficult Grand Prix. For Damon, having never raced here, it's about pacing yourself as well as ensuring that those minute little errors that we've seen creep into many, many drivers over 2 days of qualifying don't creep into Damon's race. So he should not attempt to win the race, in my opinion, in the first chicane. You've got to allow yourself the time to settle into the race. It's going to be a race of pit stops. Certainly we're going to see one from most teams. In the case of Alain Prost, I think one is what he would try to get away with. We may see two from Senna, likewise from Schumacher, possibly from Damon Hill as well. It's going to be a race of intelligence, a race of strategy, but most of all, in my view, a race about care on the racetrack. Watching what you're doing, watching what your competitors are doing, and keep on the line.
Top 8 for tomorrow's Grand Prix, and I think Gerhard Berger did not do 18 laps, by the way, but that's a misprint on our screen. There we see places 9 to 16 with Pierluigi Martini in 16th position, and I'm sure we'll see the rest of the qualifiers for tomorrow's Grand Prix here in Adelaide. John Watson and Allard Kalf, thank you very much for watching Eurosport today, and of course we'll be back with the warm-up and the Grand Prix later on, what in Europe will be Saturday night and very early Sunday morning. So here we'll see the 24 qualifiers. That is a Tyrrell hanging in the air. We'll be back tonight. Hope you'd enjoyed it, and see you later here on Eurosport. Bye for now.